Today, Islamic fundamentalists want to impose a radical version of Islam. And the first victims of that policy are women themselves. Women who are considered as minor beings, as weak individuals.
Et je suis révoltée par les crimes.
I'm in revolt against the real crimes committed in the name of Islam, but also symbolical crimes. You know, the woman is considered as the cause of all problems. She embodies the devil, so to speak.
Ou la femme qui porte en elle un peu de diabolique.
Today, the woman has become a demon, a fitna. Whoever the woman is, whatever her intentions or desires. For radical Muslims, woman is the devil, a being who must be veiled and locked up. However, Islam promotes equality and respect. The Prophet Mohamed himself has defended these values all his life. The Prophet wasn't at all the man you think he was. He said, "In this world there are three things I love: scents, women, and prayer." And he added that prayer came first. That's the story, a story filled with light, passion, and struggles that we are about to tell you. We, Muslims, are going to tell you that story like you have never heard it before, by giving the floor to these men and women who study the life of the Prophet and the Quran. If you listen carefully to them, they will surprise you. Let's go 14 centuries back in time to meet the life of a fun-loving man. Muhammad was born in the year 570 in the middle of the Arabic Peninsula in a noble but very modest family. Muhammad is an orphan. He'll never meet his father, and his mother dies when he's 6 years old. As a child, he keeps a few goats who belong to the tribe. As a teenager, he learns the craft of a caravaneer. Muhammad grows up in a patriarchal society, very brutal for women. At the time, most women are considered as a burden by men. Mere beings who need to be fed and who can be buried alive.
Les hommes étaient les chefs de
Men were leaders in domestic life as well as in public life. Women didn't have any status. They were considered as a piece of luggage. In short, Arabic society of the 7th century was a society shaped by men for the purpose of men. However, certain women are privileged, especially noble women from the Mecca. Khadijah belongs to that privileged minority. Khadijah is a rich shopkeeper, mother of 3 children, and a widower twice over. She's 40 years old when she meets Muhammad. At the time, he's only a young, discreet caravaneer, courteous, and a good negotiator.
Je pense que la rencontre avec Khadijah, ça a été
I think that the meeting with Khadijah was a unique encounter in the life of Mohammed, who was a young man from Mecca, penniless and orphan.
Et orphelin de père et de mère.
She was unique because Khadijah will take him to the peak of his
Va le
destiny.
porter au sommet de ce qu'il peut donner.
Mohammed is 24 years old when Khadijah hires him to be his employee. Khadijah offers to take care of one of his commercial caravans, and he accepts and leaves with the items that she sorted out, and he returns with considerable profit.
C'est à ce moment-là que le prophète
This is when the Prophet will get the reputation of a reliable, faithful, and honest man. Therefore, he quickly gets attention from everybody, and especially from his female employer, Khadijah.
employeuse qui était Khadijah.
Khadijah is quickly infatuated with this young man, and she begins to think about marriage. And here is the kind of strategy she puts in place to achieve her goal and ask for his hand.
Elle lui envoie donc sa servante qui lui pose
She
la
sends her
question,
maid-servant
si
who
tout d'un
asks the
coup
question,
vous
if a
trouvez
beautiful,
face à une
honest,
proposition
rich
d'une
woman
femme qui
suddenly
serait belle,
proposed marriage
qui
to
serait,
you, would you marry her?
honnête, qui serait riche,
And he replies,
et qui serait
that
aimante,
woman doesn't exist.
est-ce que
There's
vous
only a
accepteriez de vous
Khadijah.
marier?
She's the only one
Il lui
who can
dit,
have all
cette
these
femme
qualities
n'existe pas,
gathered
ça
in
peut
one
être que
person.
Khadijah. Elle est
And
la
she
seule à
says,
pouvoir
yes, indeed,
avoir
it's
toutes ces qualités
Khadijah.
réunies en une seule personne.
Would you
Et il lui dit,
eventually
oui, c'est en
accept
effet
to marry
Khadijah. Est-ce que
Khadijah?
vous accepteriez
And
éventuellement
obviously, he immediately
d'épouser
says
Khadijah?
yes.
Et donc là-dessus, évidemment, il dit oui aussitôt.
Ce que j'aime le plus dans le prophète, c'est justement...
What I best like in the Prophet is precisely his insolence, leading him to marry a 40-year-old woman 15 years older than him, who is also his boss, a rare thing back in the day. Today, I'm not so sure you would find a Muslim man who would be brave enough to marry a woman older than him and who is his boss.
Je suis pas sûre qu'on le trouve tous les jours.
And that marriage will shatter the life of Mohammed.
Il ne faut pas oublier que le
One
prophète
must
était
not
un simple
forget that the
berger.
Prophet was a mere
Khadija qui
shepherd.
était la grande commerçante,
Khadijah
qui
was
avait
the
de
great
l'argent.
merchant
C'est elle
who
qui avait
had
le
money.
capital.
She had the
C'est elle qui avait le
capital.
pouvoir.
She had the
C'est une femme
power.
qui a
This woman
fait
turned the
du
prophet into a
un homme
distinguished and
éminent,
respected
un
man.
homme respecté. Il est devenu un homme
He
avec
gained
un
status
statut
thanks to
grâce à
Khadijah.
Khadija.
It's
Il
not
n'était
his
pas
work which
un
brought
homme
him
avec un
status.
statut
It's
grâce à
Khadijah
ses
and his
efforts,
marriage
mais
with
grâce
her.
à Khadija et son mariage avec elle.
During the first 15 years of their marriage, Mohammed and Khadijah will have 4 girls. It's a rich and respected family. At the age of 40, Mohammed is a man almost like any other, but that year one event will change everything. At the time, he regularly meditates in a cave located on the heights of the Mecca. But one day, while he's meditating, he has a vision. The Archangel Gabriel. The angel presents him a piece of fabric on which is embroidered a verse from the Quran and tells him, read it. Mohammed is panic-stricken and replies, I'm not a man of letters. The angel orders him twice to read, but Mohammed repeats that he can't and he runs away to join his wife Khadijah. He said himself, I thought I became crazy. He was panic-stricken. The first person that Mohammed went to see was Khadijah, like a child who was terrified by something, and who immediately runs into the arms of his mother, who will try to console him, which was the case, and who will try to comfort him. That's a fact. He learned to pray with Khadijah. Gabriel indicated him how to pray, and he practiced with Khadijah first of all. The first Muslim on top of the list is a woman called Khadijah. It's a very strong symbol, meaning that the Prophet receives revelation and transmits it to a woman. The first Muslim is a woman. It's a fact, even if it's still difficult to admit for some fundamentalists. As if a woman didn't have what it takes in terms of authority to be the first one. The first one cannot be a female, it's necessarily a male. Exegetes and Arab Muslim historians always have the tendency to discredit the woman and consider her as a second-class citizen. Since the revelation of the Archangel Gabriel, Muhammad is the new prophet, the prophet of Islam. God transmits him verses that are part of the Quran. His mission is to convey these words to men and women. His main message is, there is only one God, Muhammad is his prophet. But the first years of preaching are difficult times. But the people from the Mecca do not adhere to this new monotheist religion. It's not easy to convert people who believe in several gods, but Khadijah is always by his side. She's a solitary and faithful wife who will greatly support him. We know that she played a great role in the psychological, human, intellectual, and philosophical making of the Prophet.
Psychologique, mentale, humaine, intellectuelle et philosophique du prophète. Donc elle aura en tout état de cause pendant
So she will eventually spend 10 years educating her husband to become a prophet.
De statut d'homme à celui de prophète.
Khadijah shares out all his joys and especially his torments. But she's not only his wife and the mother of his children. Thanks to her power, she is also her protector. And Muhammad loves that woman. By the way, contrary to the customs of the times, which allow men to have several wives, Muhammad will remain faithful throughout their 25 years of marriage. In the year 619, Khadijah dies. She's 65 years old. The year of her death is considered in the Arab Muslim tradition as the year of sorrow. Without her, would Muhammad have faced his destiny? At the death of Khadijah, everything will change. Politically speaking first, Muhammad no longer has a protector. The people from the Mecca neither want of him nor of his religion. They will even harass him and force him to exile. Accompanied by his daughters, Muhammad leaves the Mecca for Medina. Sentimentally speaking, everything changes. Muhammad is 50 years old and a new life begins.
Khadija, qui était la femme
Since the death of Khadijah, who embodied the wife-mother figure, Muhammad liberated himself from the mother figure, and he could live his life as he wished. He no longer lived under constraints, he no longer had that burden. After being monogamous for 25 years, Muhammad becomes polygamous like most men at the time. He admires women around him, and he marries 2 of them. The first wife has the mission of educating his daughters. The second wife, the one who will influence the Prophet, is called Aisha. With her, he discovers passion. Lots of historians say that she was the love of Muhammad's life. She also says that she was the only virgin that Muhammad has met. She's mischievous, joyful, playful, and she made his head spin. And there is a deep love, passionate, unrestrained, and limitless between them, a sort of mutual possession. I believe the Prophet must have been very possessive towards Aisha, and so there is a sort of voracity. Aisha and Muhammad love each other, but that love doesn't please everybody. Muhammad's opponents, in particular, will do everything to separate them. There's an anecdote which says that a caravan set off on the journey and it came back without Aisha, who apparently got lost as she was looking for her necklace. On that night, there was a man from Quraysh called Safwan who found her. And it happened that this man was very handsome, and he took Aisha back home. Obviously, people started gossiping, and they said that Aisha spent the night with one of the most handsome men from Quraysh. Therefore, malicious gossip spread the rumor that Aisha wasn't sincere, was probably unfaithful, etc., etc. So the Prophet was very disturbed because he loved Aisha very sincerely. But he was an Arab man with the virility of an Arab man, meaning that we cannot attack his wife and his honor without any reason. So he was deeply affected. And there was what we call for more than 1 month slander, which developed. And the Prophet, who asked the question, "What am I doing? Should I punish her? Is she guilty of something or not?" He asked the same question to his companions from her circle, women who surrounded him. It was a very painful moment for Aisha because he had a doubt about her fidelity. The Prophet feels lonely. He asks questions concerning his couple. This is when God intervenes and addresses him. His words will relieve Mohammed.
Dieu a fait descendre, comme on dit, une révélation où
God brought a revelation which made Aisha innocent. He said she didn't do anything wrong, and he blamed all those who indulged themselves into slander and said it was a huge sin.
De s'être laissé aller, en disant que c'était un énorme péché.
From that day on, the Quran says, "You shall not receive a unique testimony over this kind of situation, notably towards your wife's chastity."
Notamment vis-à-vis de la chasteté de vos épouses. Ce cas-là fait que toutes les
So with that case, all women were protected in a way by God himself.
De ce point de vue-là, et que aucun homme,
and no man, even if he's an enemy or a jealous man, can harm women, and he's the only one to testify against them.
Leur porter préjudice dès lors qu'il est seul à témoigner contre elles.
This verse well confirms that Islam considers God as being the woman's foremost protector. Muhammad says that the love he feels for Aisha is as strong as a rope knot. With her, he's no longer the same man. With her, he discovers pleasure. They are very close. They have a very particular relationship.
Mohammed ne trouvait pas de problème s'il faisait la prière.
Mohammed didn't have any problem if he prayed while Aisha was in his bedroom, meaning she was kissing him. In other words, Mohammed and Aisha were inseparable. Aisha boasted about the fact that the Prophet had received a revelation when they were together in bed. There's a close connection between prayer and women, meaning love and sexuality. And that's the essence of the Quran, of the Muslim religion, that we tend to forget today. The Prophet has talked a lot about sex, not in the sense of male pleasure, like some caricatures depict it, even though it interested him as well. But he especially talked about female pleasure. One must recognize, without any intention to overpraise, that there were great texts at the time. It's surprising to hear a prophet saying in official texts on the Sunnah that the difference between man and animal is man's ability to give pleasure to the woman. It's cute, and he can't expect more than that. In Islam, generally speaking, bodily pleasure is a right. Man and woman have the same right to pleasure. It's even considered a God-given thing. Refusing bodily pleasure is refusing a gift from God. That's why there's no clergy in Islam. There's no man or woman who take a vow of abstinence. The only limitation stipulated by the Muslim law called the Sharia, when a legitimate couple lives in its intimacy and has intercourse, well, there's no limit except for violence. The partner mustn't be forced or obliged to do something she doesn't like or that she doesn't feel like doing. We're in Medina. After 15 years of prophecy, Muhammad has finally imposed himself. He's listened and well respected. More and more women convert themselves to Islam. This man was ahead of his time because of his personal maturity, his ability to distance himself, a very modern psychological sharpness because he was able to think from other people's points of view, understand their problems and help them get on with their life. Especially when it meant leaving the tribal world to enter the world of Islamic solidarity and self-responsibility before God. This is when Muhammad takes several wives. Today, of course, polygamy is shocking. But let's not forget that at the time, the harem is a common thing.
Il y a une expression qui dit
There's a proverb according which a prophet has the copulatory capacity equal to 40 men, and Muhammad has the copulatory capacity of 40 prophets. This is a metaphor. We consider that he's the paragon of the perfect and complete lover who can satisfy his female partner or his wife at every level.
Qui à tous les niveaux est satisfaisant pour sa partenaire ou son épouse.
Day after day, the new co-wives will join Aisha's house. The Prophet's harem was born. The rules that govern this harem are very different from what you think. Man doesn't have all powers, far from that. We fantasize a lot about the self-service that man seemed entitled to, but it's not a self-service. First of all, man is bound to a strict rotation. No woman will leave her place to another woman under the pretext that the Prophet isn't in good shape. On the contrary, everything can be negotiated. And even when a woman doesn't feel well or feels off color, she can negotiate her night with a co-wife with who she gets on well. How does it happen? She can say, for example, I'll leave the Prophet in your hands for 2 nights, and then next week I'll have him for 2 nights. Another law obliges the husband not to abandon his wives for too long. Beware if you don't obey that rule. And listen to that story. One day, the vice king of Egypt sends Muhammad a slave called Maria the Copt, a very beautiful woman. Muhammad falls madly in love. He marries her and locks himself up with her for several weeks and forgets about other wives. In the harem, there's an immediate rebellion.
Il y a une panique générale dans le harem.
There's a general panic in the harem, and women form a league and go see their father. And men organized themselves, formed a delegation, and came to see the Prophet and told him, O divine Prophet, you cannot stay more than 15 days with the same woman, even if she's very beautiful, because you must assure equal treatment for all women.
Aux autres femmes, une équité dans le traitement.
Women are not slaves. Women are not submitted to the same prophet. And the Prophet's home is a lively place. Women assert themselves and speak out loud. Women are very jealous of other women, and it's normal because, as I told you earlier on, it's a problem of social status. Actually, each woman wanted to be considered as the Prophet's favorite one. Aisha is the one who mostly suffers from domestic conflicts. Everybody knew that Prophet loved Aisha and that she was his favorite one. Aisha knew it as well, but she was jealous. For example, if she saw another woman serving a dish to the Prophet, she worked it so that one of her slaves or freed slaves drops the dish so that the Prophet won't eat it. The Prophet knew that as well, and it didn't bother him. She can show her claws if someone is playing around her man. On several occasions, she proved that she could be a terrible tigress. And by the way, everyone feared her because she's capable of getting angry to keep her privileges as the Prophet's favorite woman. What we learn from scholars and historians is that Aisha wasn't satisfied at all. She wasn't a happy woman. She was always angry and unhappy. And Muhammad was looking for modest means to satisfy her. It's not easy for Aisha to share her husband with several wives. Not easy for Muhammad as well to manage the conflicts between his different wives. At this time, the Prophet will receive a revelation from God concerning marriage. A sacred word which limits polygamy. God says, man has the right to marry a maximum of 4 wives. He must limit his harem to 4 women. This text is truly revolutionary. But God makes clear in that verse that the husband must be just and fair towards his wives. And he adds, if you cannot be fair towards your 4 wives, forget about it. Forget about polygamy and limit yourself to 1 wife. And he adds in that same verse, God knows that you cannot be fair. God himself, supreme judge, absolute rationality, tells us, no, you cannot be fair.
Donc en fait, qu'est-ce que Dieu voulait?
So what did God want in the end? He wanted to make men understand that monogamy was the best way, but he could not suddenly tell them, after having several wives, you shall have only 1. So there were pedagogical steps to make them understand in a roundabout way, considering the Arab ways of the times, that it was difficult to be completely fair. But he slightly overestimated men because 13 centuries later, they still haven't understood the message correctly. After long years of preaching and wars, Prophet Mohammed imposes himself as a political leader and a spiritual leader. He creates the Islamic nation. Mohammed is the prophet of all Muslims and especially of all female Muslims. Men and women came to see him on a daily basis. He was bombarded with questions. When he was not at war or on travel, everybody came to ask for his advice on how to live their life. Let's not forget that we're talking about a world which switches from one set of standards to another. Everything requires innovation. And very often, men were lost. We have a situation where the Prophet was considered as the great psychoanalyst by everyone. People came to him and felt sorry for their love life. What's going to happen to me after I die? All kinds of questions. And he would constantly consider women's dignity when he talked to them. He considered their soul and their responsibility to talk to God and confess themselves so that they felt incited to become an honest person. He knows that the woman's condition is a major issue. He knows that we must shake up the most traditional spheres of society which still considers girls as subhuman. Mohammed didn't have any problem with women. He could surely admire a woman if she was attractive, but he would never reduce her to the woman object. The woman could have an opinion. She could therefore have a conversation with him. He accepted talking to women. He didn't have any problem with that. He had no prejudice according which the woman was a second-class creature. A second-class creature? All his life, Mohammed will fight against this preconceived idea. He actually devotes a great part of his time to settle domestic arguments. And women don't hesitate to appeal to him. They even ask him to decide over matters. He was a very suggestive man. He wasn't modest at all. On the contrary, I mentioned the example of the woman who came to see him because her husband couldn't satisfy her, but she specified that her husband's problem was that he had a flabby penis. That's what she said. And some men around the Prophet said, "Stop this woman, she's not ashamed to talk so crudely to the Prophet." And the Prophet just laughed and he told the woman, "You can ask for divorce, and we can liberate you from this man who can't satisfy you sexually." On a daily basis, he acts as a protector and a tolerant man, but he goes further than that. Mohammed will change women's status. He will ban certain ancestral customs. First, the issue concerning the murder of little girls. Before Islam, we killed women at birth, girls infanticide, because you had to feed them. So when Islam comes to say, you shall not kill women, they have the right to live because God has decided their birth, they must be kept alive. So it allowed women to be protected by the Islamic law, notably in poor areas. And that's not all. Mohammed wants to go further. Provide the woman with a legal existence. God accompanies him in this will to change. God reveals a Quranic verse which imposes to this patriarchal society an extraordinary right, the right to legacy for women. Before then, women couldn't inherit from anything, and sometimes they were even part of the legacy themselves and were considered as goods. And he gave women the right to legacy, including the fact that she could transmit part of her legacy to another person. The woman even has authority to transmit her goods to others, so there's a radical change in the woman's status. So it's a huge change concerning the respect of each woman's dignity. It's an essential point. Mohammed also orders husbands to better treat their wives. Men's brutality and violence were actually common, but they were admitted. The Prophet rejects this model. Because he's a very open and tolerant man, the Prophet never ever hit any of his wives.
Jamais.
And he said in a hadith, a good man never hits his wife.
Un homme bien ne frappe jamais sa femme.
A woman went to see Mohammed and told him, "My husband slapped me across the face," and Mohammed said, "Hit him, slap him back." That's the way to be respected. The husband said,
"Frappe-le, gifle-le. C'est comme ça qu'il faut faire." Le mari a dit,
"She wants to slap me in public so that I'll be humiliated?" A prophet who takes side with the wife. A prophet who protects the wife. These historical truths are essential to remind to the public today. Today, where fundamentalists try to use Muhammad and betray the words of the Quran. One thing must be said to all the charlatans. Excision doesn't exist. There's no allusion to it. Better, circumcision doesn't exist. It's not in the text. In the same way, the stoning of adulterous men and women is not in the text. And there's more to it. Here's the answer to those who want to impose forced marriage in the name of the Quran. There is no text which obliges the woman or the young girl to marry a husband that she doesn't want or refuses. Absolutely not. Banning of the murder of little girls, right to legacy, statement of equality between a male Muslim and a female Muslim in the name of God. Muhammad and Islam have revolutionized the status of women. But it's not a reason to deny the obscure side of things, the resistance of misogynists, these men who have all powers.
Muhammad
didn't have the possibility to completely change the face of society where the woman was still considered as a minor being. Islam has revolutionized many things, but it wasn't like the work of a magic wand. Society was also full of locking forces. Around the Prophet, some men don't accept the new rights granted to women. In particular, Omar, a close companion of Muhammad. He will do everything to stop the liberation of the woman.
Le chef de file de la misogynie, c'était
Omar al-Khattâb was the leader of misogyny. He was very embarrassed by all those rights. Omar al-Khattâb is a very strong character, in the sense that he was brutish and he didn't accept the fact that women enjoyed these rights. Women feared Omar a lot more than the Prophet, who they didn't fear. Women felt uncomfortable in the presence of Omar. Several anecdotes confirm it.
Le prophète était avec des femmes et on entendait leur éclat de rire à l'extérieur.
The Prophet was in the company of women. You could even hear the laughter from outside, and Omar would walk in that atmosphere. Women who didn't wear the veil took the veil. Some of them hid, others ran away, and the Prophet underlined the repressive and strict nature of Omar by saying, "If the devil sees you on that side of the street, he'll certainly move to the other side of the street."
Ah oui, si le diable te voit sur ce côté de la rue, il changera certainement de côté.
Contrarily to Muhammad, Omar wants to lock up Muslim women and hide their body. He's even happy when he sees them wearing a cloak. But that's not the case at all for Muhammad. For the Prophet of Islam, the veil is not a priority. We don't have any explicit evidence showing us the Prophet as a strict man who wants to see all women veiled around him. We don't have such evidence. The tradition doesn't talk about that. We don't talk about it, so we consider it's a minor issue. In my opinion, it was secondary for him as well. However, a lot of religious men today want to impose the veil. So is the veil an obligation in Islam?
Non.
In my opinion, it cannot be an obligation. I simply think that legislators are afraid themselves of their own demons. We know very well that since the advent of psychoanalysis, and we knew it even before then, that man is somehow afraid of the woman who symbolizes that disposition to pleasure, which can never be fully satisfied. So hiding the woman's body is a way for man to hide this fear towards female orgasm. During his life, Mohammed has always refused any form of violence towards women. However, there remains an indelible stain which he cannot hide. This verse from the Quran allowing husbands to beat their wives if they don't obey. You are referring to the sentence in the Quran, which is a source of problems. All others are related to history or context, but not related to the sacred text. So, the question is it a means or an end? There must be a solution, but the novelty is that Muslim males and females can now sit around the table and agree that this verse creates a problem. It's definitely controversial.
Cette parole pose problème. Cette parole nous pose problème. Oui.
Until the end of his life, Mohammed will be haunted by the issue of women. Despite his religious and political victories, the old man is worried. He's afraid that the rights he managed to impose, such as equality between men and women in the name of God, or the banning of little girls' murders, might be questioned after his death. If you just take his last speech at the Mecca, called the farewell speech, he repeated the banning of murder, and he recommended that 7th century society, where the woman still had a lot of rights to conquer, well, he told them, God is your witness, God is your judge concerning women.
Dieu est votre témoin, Dieu est votre juge pour ce qui est des femmes.
Mohammed will express this attention and consideration for women until his last breath. We are in 632. Mohammed is 62 years old. He used to fairly share his days between his different women. When he fell ill, others understood that he wanted to go to Aisha's place. And he was told, go ahead, there's no problem. He spent his last days at Aisha's place, and according to history, he died in her arms.
Selon l'histoire, dans ses bras.
Prophet Mohammed, the leader of the Muslim nation, chooses to spend his last moments alone with his wife Aisha. An interesting symbol. This man has defended the woman's status, dignity, and freedom. Mohammed was definitely a modern man for his time. But today, would the Prophet of Islam be proud of his heirs? Today, more than 1 billion Muslims practice an open and tolerant Islam. But a minority of Muslim fundamentalists are taking over that religion. And they try to impose an interpretation which has nothing to do with the Prophet's truth.
Je crois que si on apprenait à nos jeunes la vie du prophète et son comportement.
I think that
avec les
if we
femmes.
taught the
Et
Prophet's
si
life to our
les
young
hommes
ones and
musulmans
his behavior
aujourd'hui
towards women,
essaient de
and if
ressembler
today's
un peu au
Muslim men
prophète
could
en
behave
ce
in
qui
the same
concerne
way
sa
instead
relation
of just
aux femmes,
wearing
comme
the
ils
same
essaient de
beard
lui
or
ressembler
clothes,
apparemment en ce qui concerne le port du barbe ou une certaine manière de s'habiller.
I'm sure that
Je
the
suis
status
sûre
of Muslim
que le
women
statut de la
would
femme
probably
musulmane
be one of the
serait
best status in the
peut-être
world.
l'un des meilleurs dans le monde.
And what if light actually came from a rereading of our history? What if the Prophet would be today's best ally for women?
On demande à
We
ces
asked
jeunes
these
filles,
young girls,
quelle est
what
la
is the most
parole du
important
prophète
word
la plus
from the
importante
Prophet?
pour toi? Eh bien,
And they'll
elles vont
tell
vous
you,
citer
the search for
la
knowledge
recherche du
is an
savoir est une
obligation for any
obligation pour tout
Muslim male
musulman
or
et toute
female.
musulmane.
And therefore,
elles
they
se tournent
asked their
vers
mom
papa
and
et
dad,
maman, et
what do
elles
you
disent,
mean
mais
that I
qu'est-ce
should
que
get
tu me
married so
racontes?
soon?
Que je dois me marier
But this
très
is
vite?
nonsense.
Mais tu
On the
dis n'importe
contrary,
quoi. Mais
to
au
be a
contraire,
good
pour être
Muslim
une bonne
female,
musulmane, je dois avoir
I
un
need
bac
to get
plus
my
5.
master's degree.
Celle qui veut
Concerning the
travailler,
woman who wants to
son mari
work,
décide que,
her husband may
soi-disant,
claim that
l'islam
Islam
dit
says
que
you
tu
shall
dois
not
pas
work.
travailler.
But once they
Mais
discover the real
elles se
history,
réapproprient
they
l'histoire,
start
et elles
questioning
disent,
their
comment ça, je
husband.
dois pas travailler?
You
Mais
forget that the
tu oublies
Prophet
que
has
le
married his
prophète a
own
épousé
boss,
sa propre patronne.
his own boss.
C'était sa patronne.
And today
Et
you're
tu viens me
telling
dire
me that
aujourd'hui,
Islam
l'islam
says
dit
I
que je dois
shouldn't
pas
work?
travailler. Jusque-là,
For
ce sont
centuries,
les hommes
men were the
qui ont
main
fait parler
interpreters
l'islam
of
au
Islam.
siècle.
And now I'd like to
Et,
say with a
ce qu'on
smile
peut dire en
that
souriant,
knowing what men
c'est
have
que,
done with
vu
that
ce que
religion,
certains hommes en ont
let's
fait,
now see what women can
voyons
do
ce
with
que les
it.
femmes peuvent en faire.